setting mine all up so you'd have your notes. So anyway, I hope you can follow me and get some notes down. Hopefully they'll bring them next week, but that doesn't help us very much right now.
What did you have to say?
So, all right, let's yeah, please. Let's turn to James chapter 3. We're going to read that.
Control the tongue.
Yep. And then we'll try to unpack this. So again, I'll try to quote some scripture and give you the references and some we'll read. And I just want to explain for the folks that are new here tonight, we had notes last week and I prepared some for this week, but they didn't get printed. So it's, and I designed the course around you having those notes with you. So anyway, we'll do the best we can. All right, James chapter 3, verse 1. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships, although they are so large and are driven by fierce winds. They are turned by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot desires. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body, sets on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird and reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceeds blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus no spring yields both salt water and fresh. So in this chapter, James talks about the tongue. And he tells us that the way we control our tongue is an evidence of our level of spiritual maturity. So if you look at chapter 1, verse 26, he said, if anyone among you thinks he is religious or spiritual and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. And then if you look at chapter 3, verse 2, James said, for we all stumble in many things. And I guess all of us could say amen to that. None of us are perfect. But he said, if anyone does not stumble in word, that's how he uses his tongue, he is a perfect man. And in James, perfect means mature, spiritually mature. So what James is saying is if we do not stumble in our words with our tongue, that is an evidence that we are a mature believer and we're able to bridle the whole body. It's interesting that how the tongue is a reflection of our spiritual maturity. Years ago, you know, when I used to go to the doctor, and you know that when you go to the doctor and have your annual checkup, he always tells you to stick out your tongue. And they put that thing on your tongue. And one day I said to them, like, why do you do that? Like, I hate that. Why do you do that? And he said, your tongue is a mirror of the rest of your body. He said, I can look at your tongue and I can discern a great deal about the health of your body, which was a great surprise to me. So James is saying, he's taking a natural illustration to make a spiritual point, and what he's saying is that the way we use our tongues is a reflection of the level of our spiritual maturity. Now, when we talk about the tongue, here's something we need to learn straight off. James said in chapter 3, verse 8, no one can tame his tongue. I mean, we've all tried all sorts of things, like count to 10 before we say the wrong thing. But the truth of the matter is, by ourselves, we can't tame our tongue, which simply means we need the Lord's help. Jesus said, Matthew 12:24, if you want to jot the scripture down, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So when people speak, you know what's in their heart. Matthew 12:24. You know what's in their heart. Because what comes out came from some place, came from their heart. So Jesus warned us, Matthew 12:36, he said, but I say to you that every word that men speak, they will give an account in the day of judgment. So this whole business about the tongue is really a serious business. Now I want you to look at chapter 3, and you will discover 6 pictures of the tongue. And I'll just point them out without, doing a whole lot of explanation. But in verse 3, he said that a bit in the horse's mouth is a picture of the tongue. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. I rode horses for the last 25 years out in the mountains. And I was always amazed how little I am and how big that horse is and how he has to obey me because of the bit in his mouth. And the tongue is a bit. It determines direction. It'll determine the direction of your life. Second, he said, the second picture is a rudder of a ship. Verse 4, look at the ships. They're large, they're driven by fierce winds, but they're turned by a very small rudder. You think about the rudder, its size in comparison to what it influences. He's saying the tongue is a little member, but it has an incredible influence on the direction our lives take. Third picture is of a fire. Verse 6, the tongue is a fire. Now, fire can warm you or it can burn you. And the tongue has that same capacity. It can be positive or negative. It can be helpful or it can be destructive. And he talks about a little fire that burns a whole forest. The fourth picture in verse 7 and 8 is of a poisonous serpent. It is, verse 8, it's an unruly evil full of deadly poison. The tongue has the ability to spread poison and be incredibly destructive. And the last 2 pictures are the picture of a spring. verse 11. A spring, refreshing, renewing, satisfying, healing. And verse 12, it is the picture of a fruit tree. So I want to give you three things about the tongue, if you want to. This is how we'll unpack this passage. First of all, the tongue has power to direct. So he says in verse 1, "My brethren, let not many of you become teachers." A teacher is a director. He directs by his words. So it seems like a lot of people in the church that James was involved with wanted to become teachers. James said what you need to understand is that a teacher will face a strict judgment. I am aware of that every time I begin to teach. It is a serious thing to teach the Word of God. And because it provides direction. Direction comes from our words. You direct your family by your words. Churches are directed by words. Even nations are directed by words.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand that our words can influence the direction of our lives and the direction of other people's lives. So whenever I think about that, I think about two prayers. If you want to jot the verses down. Psalm 141, verse 3. This is a prayer I pray quite a bit.
Okay.
Psalm 141, 3 says, "Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth, and keep watch over the doors of my lips." In other words, he's praying that God will help him to be saying the right thing. And in Psalm 19, verse 14, he said, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord." Psalm 19, verse 14. At the end of the day, what really matters about our words is whether they're acceptable to the Lord.
Is this Psalm 119?
Psalm 19, verse 14. Yeah. Psalm 19, verse 14. "Let the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart, be acceptable in your sight, O Lord." The second thing is that the tongue has power to destroy. And in verse 5 to 8, James uses the illustration of a raging forest fire and a poisonous serpent. There's two pictures. And both of them are destructive. So, James is saying, a forest fire starts with the tiniest little spark. But it explodes and can burn a whole forest. What we need to understand is that our words can do that. I've seen churches almost blown out of the water because of wrong words that were spoken. Just a little word, a wrong word, a critical word. But it snowballs and it spreads, and suddenly there's destruction. Many homes are destroyed by words. Angry words, bitter words, careless words. And it can seem like a little, it's just such a little thing. But the problem is, it spreads. It's destructive and it defiles. I want you to look at verse 6 as well, when we talk about the power to destroy. He said, "The tongue is a fire, world of iniquity. The tongue is so set in our members that it defiles the whole body. Now, you know that as a believer, that when you say wrong words, it's like a poison that goes through your whole system. Because it's so foreign to what it should be. So out of place. So he said the tongue is power to destroy. Let me give you a whole pile of verses. Just jot them down. I'm going to quote them. But if you want to just put them down, and maybe sometime you want to reread them. Proverbs 11:9 says, "The hypocrite with his mouth destroys his neighbor." Proverbs 11:9. Proverbs 17:9 says, "He who repeats a matter separates friends." Now, all of us have lived long enough to see that. But see again, the tongue has power to destroy. Proverbs 18:21 says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." Proverbs 18:21. Proverbs 12:18 says, "There is one who speaks like the piercing of a sword." And you know, people have said to me, "Well, I just say it like it is." But that can be so destructive and so wounding. I used to have a man in my church, I actually invited him to leave, but his word was, "I speak the truth." But he was like a machine gun. And his words pierced and hurt and destroyed. And that's the potential for every one of us. The tongue has the power to destroy. Let me read a couple of others. Proverbs 26:20, "Where there is no fire, no wood, the fire goes out. Where there is no talebearer, strife ceases." I believe that all of us need to make a decision that we will not pass it on, we'll stop it. I used to tell people who brought me stuff, my ears are not garbage cans. I'm not receiving that. But too often, things are received and then they're passed on. That's like putting another stick on the fire. And we're warned about that. Psalm 64:3 says, "Who sharpens their tongues like a sword." You've all heard the saying, "He's got a sharp tongue." But the problem with a sharp tongue is it wounds. That's the problem. "Who sharpen their tongues like a sword and bend their bows to shoot their arrows," bitter words. And all of us have experienced that. I was a pastor for a long time. I had a lot of arrows shot my way. I understand the pain of bitter words. But James cautions us against that. So now let's take our Bibles. We're going to read out of the New Testament. I want you to turn to 2 Corinthians 12. We're just going to read quite a few verses here. 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 20. Paul is writing to the Corinthian church, and he's going to come and see them. But he said, "But I fear when I come, I shall not find you as I wish, and that I shall be found by you such as you do not wish." In other words, he said, "I don't want to come because I'm afraid of what I'll find, and I don't want to do that." So he said, "Lest there be contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, backbitings, whisperings, conceits, and tumults." Now, if you look at that verse, almost all of the sins are the sins of the tongue. Not all of them, but most of them. And Paul said, that's what I'm afraid I will find. Now let's go to Galatians chapter 5. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 15. He said, but if ye bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another. Galatians 5:15.
So what you sold today.
What he's saying is, if you don't stop the misuse of your tongue, your church is going to implode. And I've watched a lot of churches actually implode from the inside. And the reason was that people were biting and devouring each other with their words. So the tongue has this terrible capacity to destroy. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29. Says, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth.
Amen.
A corrupt word is a word that defiles,
Amen.
makes dirty. Said as Christians, we should let no corrupt word proceed out of our mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. I'm going to come back to that verse after that. So, James said in verse 11, chapter 4, verse 11, do not speak evil one of another, brother. And the last verse that I want to give you on this is 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 10. 1 Peter 3 and 10, he said, he who would love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. So if you want to enjoy life, he said, be careful how you use your tongue. Okay, let me give you the third and final thing. The tongue has the power to direct, and it has the power to destroy. But it has the power to delight. And if you look at James 3 and glance at verse 9 and 10, you will see that James refers to the tongue, and he calls it, it's like a spring. Or it brings refreshment. And it brings healing. Let me give you again several proverbs. Proverbs 10:11 says, the mouth of the righteous is a well of life. Proverbs 10:11. Proverbs 12:18 says, the tongue of the wise promotes health.
Amen.
Proverbs 12:18. Proverbs 16:24 says, pleasant words are like honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones.
Amen.
Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath. So let me take you to a couple of more verses as we wrap it up here. Let's go to Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6. Colossians chapter 4 verse 6 says, let your speech always be with grace. Said about Jesus that they were amazed at the gracious words that came out of his mouth. Let your speech always be with grace,
Amen.
seasoned with salt,
Hallelujah.
that you may know how to answer each one.
Amen.
And then let's go back to that verse in Ephesians. I want to just look at it one last time. Ephesians 4:29. and you've got the contrast. Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers.
Wow.
So here's the choice, and I'll close with this. We have a choice to be wounders or healers. It's a choice to be wounders or healers. So I've got a tongue. I could use it to wound you, or I could use it to heal you. I could use it to discourage you, or I could use it to encourage you. Well, some people say to me, well, I do a little of both. No, you can't do that. If you look at James here, he said, a spring cannot bring forth fresh water and salt water. It can't. If you got fresh water and you mix salt water with it, you don't have a little fresh and a little salt. You just got salt water. So I've had people say to me, well, you know, I'm pretty good with my tongue most of the time. But we are called to be good with our tongue all the time. It's a choice we make. So we meet people, we can either bless them, we can bring grace to the hearers, or we can destroy them. Just our words. That can happen in your house, with your kids, with your spouse. Can happen in your office. Can happen in your school. Can happen wherever we are. So James said, if you are healthy and spiritually mature, your tongue will bring delight, and it will not destroy. So that's essentially what I wanted to share with us tonight. So, any questions, any comments, any thing about it? I guess we're good. So, you know, it's quite a thing. Like, I can say I love you, or I can say I hate you. Same time. But what a difference. What an incredible difference. In your church, you can be positive influence, or you can be negative influence. And so much of it is connected with what we say. Anyway, God bless you. Yep. Next week we're doing chapter 4 and 5, and we're done. Yep.
You were saying that at a time in church, somebody was teaching and the words were devastating in the church. Was it a personal word or the word from the Bible that he was using?
You know, I got such, it's terrible. I've got such bad
You were saying somebody was teaching in the church or sharing in the church,
Right.
but he uses his tongue to destroy a lot of people in the church.
Yep.
Was that the word from the Bible or from his own personal make-up words?
Right. No, it's true. We have tremendous influence with our words. I mean, do you think about it? Our nation is directed by words, by the words of our leaders. Either good direction or bad direction. Churches are directed mostly by the words of the pastor. So because words are wholesome and healing, it moves the church in the right direction. If the words are demeaning or discouraging, it moves the church. So, you know, we just, sometimes we think, well, you know, like we're just little, I mean, it's just little old me. But you see, that bit in that big horse's mouth, it's no bigger than my finger. And the rudder on that ship, you know, it's hardly any size at all. So even if we might think, well, you know, we're not important, what we say is not important, it really is. Because we all have our circle of influence that we influence by our words, so.
Now, what I'm saying, what I mean is this.
Yeah.
Was he using the word from the Bible? Or he was, those words were his own words?
Right.
Was
Yes.
he quoting the Bible, or he was saying something different from the Bible?
I agree.
That's my question.
Right.
Because the Bible also have encouragement words, you also have discouragement words to some people.
That's right.
Because some of them, by the time you put it the way it is in the Bible, there are two things that happens. Either somebody will accept the word and repent, or he will reject the word and get angry.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with those ones?
Right.
I just think usually like the word gets released, right? But then when the word speaks to your heart, you know if it goes for you, because through the Holy Spirit, right? If you're living in the right direction with God, then you rejoice. But if you know, like example, this chair is living in sin, and somebody become and preach the message, the Holy Spirit exhort this person, right? But the person will feel it, right? If this person is living in righteousness and in goodness, if you enjoy the message. But if the person is not living right, the word will pierce the heart. And the person will say, oh, he just threw it to me. He's just trying to stone me, right? Because sometimes as a human, the word is powerful. Like, the word will convict anybody of sin, whether you've done right or wrong. But then if you're the preacher, it's preaching in the wrong direction, then God will know, because only God can know the heart of people. Does this make sense? Right? But as a preachers and as a man of God, we should always speak in love. You know, as a man of God, many times God will tell me very detailed things about people. And I don't go and tell, oh, this and that. I say, Lord, just give me the wisdom to speak. Because Daniel asked for wisdom before he went to see the king. Right? Like, I'll share these examples.
So that means that person may not have spoken in the right way, or may not have spoken with love in his heart, right?
That's right, yeah. And
So
that
that's the difference.
yeah. And that could harm people, right? As he was saying.
Right.
So, yeah, it's important that we have that love so we can speak out of love, right?
But I also believe it also comes from